Us. My name is Lorraine Bauer, and I'm the Executive Director of the CIO Association of Canada. CIOCAN is a community of over 550 Canadian CIOs, CISOs, and technology leaders. Our mission is to facilitate sharing of best practices, networking, executive development, and to collaborate on issues that are facing technology leaders. Today's webinar, Advancing Endpoint Security in the Hybrid AI-Powered Era, is a result of the collaboration and partnership with our sponsors from Dell and Intel and our CIOCAN community members who came together to develop a white paper, which will be released after today's call. Thank you all so much for your support and your investment in the CIOCAN community. We have set aside a few minutes at the end of today's session to address any questions or share any comments you may have, but please note we will not be facilitating questions during the webinar. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, the Director of Programs for our CISO division, Sunny Sari, the Director of Information and Security at Pattison Food Group. Sunny is a seasoned cybersecurity practitioner with over 15 years of experience in the field. He began his career in application support and quickly transitioned to building and managing infrastructure, which naturally led him to his true passion, cybersecurity. Throughout his career, Sunny has been dedicated to safeguarding information and ensuring strong standards of security within every organization that he's worked for. And next, I'd like to introduce Darian Patel, a client technologist at Dell who empowers organizations through their workforce transformation journeys by helping them put their employees first. He is a certified project management professional with demonstrated history of working in the information technology and financial services industry for the last 15 years. And joining us on the phone today is Eric Chong, Technical Solutions Specialist at Intel, specializing in the Intel vPro platform. He has worked in IT for over 25 years and has authored 2 books on IT tool sets. Eric is in high demand as a podcast guest, a prolific blogger, and a frequent speaker at events and in articles. And now I will turn this over and invite Sunny to start the discussion.
Thanks, Lorraine. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. Okay, so really, thank you all for joining us. Just like Lorraine said, we really appreciate this. We're going to talk about today. It's based on this fireside chat is based on this position or white paper called "Advancing Endpoint Security in the Hybrid and AI-Powered Era." So, what do we mean by that? Well, gone are those days where we were situated in one location. And it was a lot easier for CIOs and CISOs to manage that environment because it was one location where you had to manage the security and the IT infrastructure and everything to support that environment. Now with remote work or hybrid work, and it's here to stay, and this is my opinion. I know some companies are mandating return to office, but there's many companies which have now fully adopted hybrid work. Now that presents new challenges. It obviously presents a lot of opportunities, but with that, it also presents new challenges. Combine that with this AI revolution that's also here. You've also got a lot of great opportunities, but with that comes risks that we as CIOs and CISOs also have to manage and take into account. So with that, I'm going to, we've got a few questions that we came up with that we want to start having Darren and Eric, provide their responses to and their insight on because they've got a lot of experience. So with that, I'm going to start with the first question. It's really about, and I'll start with you, Darren. I talked about hybrid work models, right? And as well as the AI revolution, and maybe we'll categorize it into 2 buckets. So from your perspective, what are the challenges of these hybrid work models, and explore the increased attack surface due to remote access, diverse devices, but what are challenges that you are seeing of a hybrid work model?
Yeah, so thanks for the question there, Sunny. And I think to the folks that have taken the time out of their busy schedule, I'll address that question in just a few moments. But a sincere thank you to all of you. I know how busy it is this time of year, and you're prioritizing hopping on a call to hear from, Sunny, the rest of the CIO can, Dell, as well as Intel. So thank you for that partnership first and foremost. Looking forward to, continuing that as time goes on. So back to your question, right? You've kind of asked me, hey, what are you seeing from a hybrid work perspective? What are you seeing from an AI perspective? Now, I'll share some of the feedback. I have the opportunity to talk to customers kind of across the country. I know Eric does too, and he'll probably share some exciting examples or commentary there. But the first thing that you kind of touched on it, Sunny, and it's really the geographical dispersion of devices. Now, you look at your standard notebook, desktop, whatever workstation you could be using. You look at phones, maybe you've got one personal, one work. You look at just the widespread of devices that could be scattered pretty much anywhere around the world. And then when you think about your organization that you represent and you support, you could have devices at the edge, whether you're dealing with infrastructure, engineering, manufacturing, whatever type of use case there's devices everywhere. So now your attack surface is kind of sprawled, multifaceted. Now, from a Dell perspective, how we often like to talk about our security story as it relates to the endpoint, which is where I come from, is really around how security is going to be built into the device, how we build it on, and how we build with our devices. I think you're going to have some questions towards, as the conversation goes on, for me to double click on some of that. So I won't give away too much just yet, but we take security really serious as it relates to the devices, and we really treat it from an intrinsic standpoint. So you want your devices secure by design. We could talk about zero trust. We could talk about the frameworks that you all have to design to and make sure your cybersecurity kind of infrastructure is all gated to a certain extent. But pretty much, the complexity of dealing with different tools, different hardware, and then B, the second piece is this whole AI era that we're in. You called it the AI revolution. Absolutely, it is that. We often tell our customers we're going through the next industrial revolution, and it's really all about AI. And now you're seeing employees take AI into their own hands. And what I mean by that is, hey, if I'm not provided these tools from a corporation standpoint on gated tools, I'm now going to take it into my own hands. And yes, I'm going to email something from my work address to my personal because, hey, I maybe am paying for ChatGPT on my own and I want to use that LLM because it's going to make my work that much more impactful. So as a CIO, as an organization, you've been increased with complexity galore. So my heart goes out to you guys as we continue to go down this path. But you're going to want to partner with, infrastructure, technology companies that are laser focused on security.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, you brought up a good point. The attack surface has increased exponentially over the last few years because of hybrid work and the AI revolution. So yeah, there are a lot of challenges with that from a CIO and CISO perspective. So Eric, same question to you from your perspective, from an Intel perspective. What are the challenges that you've seen from a hybrid work model perspective?
All the things that Darren mentioned, but I'll add a few more. Intel's a silicon vendor, but I'll go outside the silicon piece of it. A lot of it is practices or education on your users. So I know at Intel, we go through very rigorous training where we have, white hat phishing attacks on purpose. So here's a link that looks like comes from Intel internally. You click on it, and then if you click on it, then you have a nice training module you need to take in terms of which links you should click and which ones you shouldn't have. So a lot of that is, basically the human aspect of it. We have some tools that can help identify that, obviously, but a lot of it starts from the human aspect. And the other things that are coming up recently, again, kind of outside the silicon from an Intel perspective, is in a hybrid workspace, we really can't control the items that a home user has. And you've probably seen the news, I won't name any names, but there is very specific, old routers that have been compromised because they found that firmware in there that sends stuff out there to places that shouldn't be receiving this information. So these are just different things, and how to attack these things or how to remediate against them is, ongoing battle. But I think Darren did a good job in terms of explaining everything in terms of, what's available, and we'll get into more of the specifics in terms of what is available for this hybrid workspace and AI.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Okay, well, we've talked about these challenges within a hybrid workforce and this AI-driven era. So, with that, at least from my perspective, coming from a CISO's perspective or somebody accountable for information security, it really starts with governance, right? You can put the technical tools in place, but you got to be able to have some type of governance to govern the security controls and the processes that come into play that you want your team members to follow, that they must adhere to, and that you must have executive buy-in for. So let's talk about governance and policy implementation for a hybrid workforce, for AI, the usability of AI tools. Just real quick, I'm fortunate to have many friends who are CISOs and CIOs, and I like getting their experiences. And some block LLMs completely. Some really, really focus on awareness first, and they allow, ChatGPT and some of these with an acceptable use policy that's acknowledged and adhered to. So, with that said, Darren, I'll start with you. From your experience, what are some best practices for IT governance tailored for these hybrid work models?
Yeah, great question. And I'll go back to kind of just the statement you made about whitelisting or potentially blocking LLMs from your corporation standpoint or some of the organizations that you deal with. From a Dell Technology standpoint, anytime you go to that any type of LLM, you have to authenticate, acknowledge the risk before you move forward. So they are taking security very seriously. But doing a little bit of storytelling here, some of our customers, they're starting to see individualized large language models now being deployed to endpoints. So you have a whole slew of additional security concerns that you're going to see. So to go back to kind of the question here around what type of policy, Eric touched on it, but it was a good piece of that is that training, right? How you're enforcing your end users in your environment to stay on top of things, whether you're simulating phishing attacks and things like that. When you think about the generative AI models that are now writing emails from a phishing perspective that much better, the grammar, the pronunciation, the enunciation, and some of the different terminologies that you'd see within an email are now so much better, and it's getting harder to identify that. So I think you do need to ensure you have a training regimen around that, and you're actually simulating those attacks on a regular basis. Technology plays a really big piece of this as well. So you'll hear about what we're doing from a Dell perspective. Eric will talk about what Intel's doing, but you're going to want to leverage technology solutions that do have security built in. When you look at multi-factor authentication, passwords are just not enough. You want to make sure you have, whether you're using Authenticator or a second notification, you're seeing text messages go to a phone to plug in a number. Those type of things, that 2FA are going to be paramount. A customer that we were just talking to just this past week, they're moving away from passwords and strictly relying on biometrics. So whether it's face sign-in, so leveraging, your IR camera at a technology perspective, using fingerprints, so your fingerprint reader and things like that. So you're seeing this landscape continuously evolve, and I think as an organization, and I think you'll read through that when this white paper goes out, some of those best practices there.
Okay, thanks, Darren. And Eric, from your perspective, what are some best practices for governance and then not just governance, but implementing those policies that come with your governance?
I think I'll try to keep it simple, but I think there's got to be consequences to quote unquote undesirable actions, because you can have the best policies in place, but they're not enforced. It's going to be tough to actually have any type of productive outcome. So I know some companies, I won't name who they are, but I can't think of a great example right now, but if certain, let's say the one strike, two strike, your machine becomes disabled, you can't get on the network. So there has to be that type of level of consequence. Otherwise, that, let's say undesirable behavior will continue. So with any type of policy, there's got to be some type of an enforcement that, has consequences to the actual let's call it offending employee. I'm not sure the right word it is, whether it's intentional or not intentional.
No, that's a good point, Eric. Consequences are very important because it holds your team members accountable. If I can just go back to some of the things that I've learned from our peers in terms of governance and policy implementation, the key thing that I've seen, folks, is risk, right? What is your company's risk tolerance here with regards to hybrid work and then the use of AI? And that will really drive your governance. I said before that some organizations will block LLMs, but to Darren's point, there's ways to circumvent that. But at the very least, understanding your risk tolerance at the executive level, that then will help you build that governance and those policies because you've got the buy-in. Then really about the implementation of those policies is how are you going to communicate that to your team? Is it through email? Is it through this communication channel? Is it through a roadshow? Is it a hybrid? But there are those things to consider when you're building out these policies and governance models. But this is a very key point. I know for some organizations, when they first got wind of AI and it started making traction, especially when ChatGPT got released back in a couple of years ago, I remember there was so much talk about ChatGPT being a game changer that companies had to jump on modifying their acceptable use policy. So those are some of the things that I've experienced with regards to governance policy implementation, but really that's critical to have in place. So let's go now. Let's touch upon a hybrid work model. So Darren brought up a very good point that I find as a challenge to myself, as well as other organizations. You've got cross-platform, right, in a hybrid work era. So there's two models that I've seen. One, or maybe three. One, it's a company-sanctioned devices. That's a lot easier to manage from a CISO and a CIO's perspective because they're company-approved devices which you've standardized. Number two, you have BYOD, bring your own device. That is really challenging, and I'm just sharing that from my experience on how to manage that and get buy-in for that. Number three is a hybrid. I haven't really seen much of that, but now, talking about that, if you do have BYOD or even company-sanctioned devices, maybe some people want Macs, maybe some people want to use Windows, maybe some team members want to use Linux for those more technically savvy, and the organization allows that. Now you've got cross-platform. So there's many security considerations many security implications to consider here. So with that said, and maybe I'll start with Eric this time, what are some strategies for ensuring consistent security management across these different environments and operating systems?
Or maybe I'll take a narrow view because the majority of customers I deal with, all of them actually, they're in the first camp where it's a company provided asset,
Okay.
not a BYOD or a hybrid environment. So with that lens, because that's the customers I normally deal with, they like going that particular route for various reasons because it's a company asset, they can dictate the terms on how it's being used. More importantly, they can standardize on that type of technology in it. So Intel is x86. We're the founder of that x86 technology. And from a security perspective, a lot of security tools will only work on x86 architecture. So in many cases, they have to, I don't use the word disqualify, but they can't have specific devices on it because some of the agents only work on x86 just because of the requirements from a security aspect of it. So that standardization on a very specific architecture is big. And again, just from my experience, maybe just because of the customers I deal with, they all provide that corporate device. And from the other lens of it as well, from a security, is data leakage. They can control, what can leave on that device, the DLP programs. And similarly, let's assume, I know one customer I dealt with in the past that had a very high employee turnover. And they use technology where, let's say Darren leaves company X on Monday at 4 p.m. I know that's his last date and that's his time he's leaving. They have technology that they can disable his device and even wipe that device so that even though he's logged on, all the domain credentials have been deleted, etc., they can physically wipe that device remotely in case that employee doesn't return that asset in a reasonable time. So those are just some examples that I've come across.
Okay, thank you. And Darren? What are some
Yeah, I think
cross-platform security considerations in your world?
Yeah, and I think Eric did a great job touching on some of those key things. I think collectively, everyone that's on this call, zero trust security definitely top of mind, right? Whether it's how you trust no one by default, how you're always verifying, and things like that. So that's one lens to think of it through. If we go back to the example, Sunny, of multiple devices, Eric's talked a lot about x86 architecture, but you look at from a technology standpoint, you're seeing the emergence of other silicon that's coming out there. So from an organization standpoint, we have to think a lot more. So some of that is what type of endpoint protection are you actually putting on these devices? How are you monitoring? How are you, pulling your periodic scans? If you think about the corporate issued devices, a lot easier there because you mandate a lot of that. But in the elements of bring your own device, how's your VPN? How are you authenticating that end user into your environment? So I think there is a lens that needs to be provided on endpoint protection kind of as a whole. A next piece of that is employee training, right? How are you training your employees about security? So in addition to phishing and some of the other simulation attacks, you're seeing a new era of this bring your own AI experience, right? So BYOD, bring your own device, but now you're also seeing BYO AI, another acronym we can all commit to memory after we leave this meeting. But all jokes aside, it's a matter of training our employees to make sure that they're aware of the consequence. And I think Eric called it out in a previous segment, but it's what are the repercussions, right? Hey, do I got to spend 5 extra minutes in a conversation with my manager? Or, hey, do I got to go take a training course that, maybe we're going to hit play and walk away, but we want to find ways to get around that because we know we're all busy at the end of the day. We want to make sure training is provided and actually going to be received on the other end.
Yeah, no, good point. There's a lot of cross-platform security considerations we also have to take into account. So, like you, Eric, I deal mainly with, company-sanctioned devices, and those company-sanctioned devices. One key thing in a cross-platform security consideration strategy is standardization. Standardization is key. Because you don't want scope creep or some type of creep in terms of, okay, these flavors of operating systems have this security, and now you've got deviations from that. And that can bring in a lot more risk, and risk which is unnecessary for an organization. So I believe standardization is key in any kind of cross-platform security consideration. And to Darren's point, then you layer on those technical controls to achieve the standardization that you've created there. So let's talk now a little bit more technical, Darren and Eric. We wanted to talk about your solutions in terms of how do you now provide these capabilities, because maybe I can take a step further in the white paper, which I hope that you all read. It's very valuable, very informative. I was fortunate enough to read it early on. It talks about integrating software and hardware together to achieve these security capabilities. So with that, let's talk about an integrated solution for robust security. So I'll start with Eric again. Actually, both of you, but I want to know how Intel's hardware enhancements, Dell's built-in security features, and then even lumping in CrowdStrike software capabilities. How do they strengthen these endpoint devices, especially within this hybrid workforce? So Darren,
Sure,
why don't you take it away first? Oh, sorry, Eric, go ahead.
I'll take a stab at it. In terms of the technology, since we're talking about AI, one thing that Intel did recently in the commercial space is introduce a product called Intel Core Ultra. And the difference of this product is it has an NPU built into it, a neural processing unit, which is designed for low latency, continuous AI functions. We're finding now that a lot of security vendors are utilizing this NPU to do various different things. I'll just give you an example from a CrowdStrike perspective. With CrowdStrike, and you can Google CrowdStrike Intel NPU, and there's a great technical paper that wrote on this. Basically, what they're doing is they're using the NPU to make their Falcon agent run much more efficiently. So rather than using the traditional CPU resources, they're using the NPU with a much lower power platform. And why is that important? When I speak to the large companies, a lot of them, the issue is that they have a ton of security agents that use a ton of power. And as a result of that, that ends up, you get shorter battery life. So they want to alleviate that particular issue. That's one example how CrowdStrike's using it to make their agent more efficient. Another example would be, I can't say who they are because it's not officially released yet, but I believe it will be announced in CES. But this one security company will be using the Intel NPU to determine if that call is actually a deepfake, either by voice or by image. We see that a lot now. The very smart people in terms of bypassing security by having a fake voice or simulate a voice, etc. But their software will detect that by using the NPU built into it. So these are just some examples. There's a lot of different solutions that Intel offers, and many of them have been out for many, many years from an AI perspective. It's the enablement from our partners as Dell, Microsoft, CrowdStrike, etc., that take advantage of these things.
Okay, so if I could just touch upon that for a moment, Eric, because I think that's really important. One thing that I'm, especially as a CISO, we talk about the risks of deepfakes. They're being used quite extensively now. I just got some intel stating that financial institutions are being hit by deepfakes regularly now. I think it's just a matter of time before they hit retail space as well. So you're saying that your solution or this comprehensive solution will be able to detect deepfakes, and I know that it might be in its infancy, or is it not in its infancy in terms of accuracy? Can you comment on its ability to confidently detect deepfakes?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of the companies that's
Yeah.
that's making this particular solution, but they are working collaboratively with Intel in terms of using our technology, the NPU, and optimizing it. So these can be what's the word I'm looking for, determined or called out faster, these deepfakes, using the enablement that Intel has at silicon level. So in other words, their endpoint detection agent will know that, yes, this PC is capable of having this NPU in it or has it. I will use that to more quickly determine if this call or this Zoom call is indeed a deepfake.
Oh, okay. That's really good, Eric. So just for sort of some folks who don't maybe understand NPUs at a very, very high level, do you mind explaining what you mean by NPU?
Sure. So traditionally, this PC CPU will have the CPU component of it, the central processing unit, and a graphical component of it. And what Intel's done recently, and the whole industry is going this direction, is adding a third component called an NP or neural processing unit, which is designed to handle just AI-specific tasks, low latency ones that run all the time. And we've always had AI capabilities built in the GPU and CPU, but now we've added this NPU, and that helps greatly with the power efficiency of the devices itself. So you'll see that from across all the vendors, and I think it's just a matter of time, 1 or 2 years, where all the CPUs in the marketplace will have some type of NPU built into it.
Okay, thank you. And so, Darren, do you want to take that same question?
Yeah, so just kind of building off Eric's example with the NPU, if I pick on Sunny and I pick on myself with our background blur, real life example, if we are using an AI PC in my scenario, that's going to actually offload that task to the NPU. So, you will get better battery life. But when I look at it from an industry standpoint, it's going to be on the software vendors to ultimately write hardware code to see that CPU, GPU, and NPU. So the NPU, to Eric's point, absolutely is here to stay. AI PCs, you're going to hear that term quite a bit. Microsoft, they're talking a lot about Copilot Plus PCs, so another category of these AI PCs that have more powerful neural processing units. I'd be remiss if I just don't go off on a slight tangent. I think this audience may want that reminder, but security absolutely top of mind for all of you. Microsoft Windows 10 is going to be going end of support October of 2025. So from an organization standpoint, please make sure that you've charted your roadmap to get to Windows 11. If I think about Windows 11 and what we're doing from a hardware plus, silicon, our friends at Intel, added security, greater productivity. You can take advantage of some of these AI capabilities. So please, 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 if you're not already aware of your Windows 11 plan, make sure you go do that. Now, going back to the question and what Dell is doing in this space, I kind of alluded to it in the beginning, but it's really how we like to talk about it is built in, built on, built with. So built into the device, hardware-based security is intrinsic to the device. So we have things like Safe ID, a dedicated spot away from the processor where end user credentials are stored. So if I'm a hacker trying to attack that base layer, that OS, I'm physically not going to see that. When we get to Windows 11, you're going to hear a lot about TPM 2.0 requirements. So not only what we're doing from a Safe ID perspective, but at a hardware level, you're going to see more kind of influence there. We have Safe BIOS, a means to validate whether or not that BIOS is the same version that shipped from Dell factory to your end customer there. When you think about supply chain, how we build our devices with security in mind, and I know this audience probably is very used to reading 30-40 page documents. If you want to read one on supply chain assurance, we can certainly share that link, but it'll go through everything we're doing in terms of how we build our products, what vendors we're working with, how we manufacture them. But taking it a step further, if you wanted to look at secured component verification, which basically means, hey, are those components actually the components that showed up from Dell? You have reporting that you can kind of take a look at. And then built on is the ecosystem around it. So if we use what CrowdStrike is doing, right, we can certainly power them, provide you with additional layers of visibility on your endpoints, depending on your management solution, whether it's Intune, whether you're using, you know, other third-party software solutions there. We can look to explore how we can integrate. So built in, built on, and built with. That's kind of that Dell story. Ingrained into built in, obviously we're going to take that silicon from Intel and all the incredible work that they're doing on the security front and kind of package that together.
Okay, I just want to explore that. That's really fascinating actually to me, Darren. So let's talk about built in, and you've got this new I should say more powerful hardware. So we're saying then this new evolution or this new set of PCs or laptops that are coming out will have more power than for folks to, and I'm talking about on the good side, not the bad side. They'll be able to now use their own LLMs, obviously, hopefully company sanctioned, but because right now, even, you know, I use local LLMs on my PC at home, and the response is very slow. Right, and I know why, but we're saying though in the future with more powerful hardware, you should have more speed in terms of more power to allow for more faster responses when using these AI technologies. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think if we use your example, Sunny, and hopefully the question was pointed towards me and not Eric, but number of parameters, right? Your LLM, and I'm probably going very technical in the AI space. I'm actually very fascinated by it. But if you look at your large language models or small language models, they're all gated by a number of parameters, and accuracy is going to be greatly influenced by the number of parameters. So if I look at a 1 billion or even an 8 billion parameter model, I can run that on a device. It could be, you know, my particular workstation that I'm presenting to you off of. I do have a small language model installed. I do on-device AI if I wanted to. So the number of parameters is going to kind of influence your accuracy of what you're working with. But from a CISO perspective, how are you securing the type of content that's going to be put into that LLM? Because do you want to be the next headline on, hey, my data being used to train the next model? And, you know, there's all examples over the last year of organizations that have suffered this. But ultimately, yes, technology is going to continue to evolve. AI PCs are going to be here to stay. So you want to make sure that you are focused around how you're safeguarding the data that's going to be input into there, because with time, someone's going to get creative to shrink the number of parameters to get it faster and faster. Now, if you wanted to look at the full AI development kind of use case, where you're using a GPU, a graphics processing unit, say, NVIDIA, I think about our 6008 is now, again, getting very technical. You have 48 gigs of memory where you could actually extrapolate a full large language model to one of those GPUs, and you'll see the accuracy of the information that you're putting through that model get even more informed and more up to date. So the landscape is going to continue to evolve. So you want to make sure that you're safeguarding, because AI is here to stay. The NPU is here to stay. We look at some of the information we've discussed with Microsoft, some of the work that obviously Intel's doing from a roadmap perspective, not giving away any of the secrets, but the NPU is going to be around as we look to next year. Still very much relevant. So your jobs as CISOs, your jobs as, whether it's the IT team, even the HR, using access to AI tools as a hiring tool, right, is something that you're going to want to think about, because if we don't provide our employees with the tools to do so, they're going to take it into their own hands.
Yeah,
I'll just jump on.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead,
Eric. No,
I just want to
please.
add one thing. In terms of the language models, one of the companies I deal with in the US, what they're doing is they are running language models locally on their PC, beginning to experiment. One example would be all their call center agents now use soft phones. Probably not a secret, because the physical phones are pretty much dead. In other words, use your PC as a phone. And what they're doing is running a whisper language model locally. So when they speak to the clients in this particular industry, there's a lot of fraud that happens based on the cadence of the client and the words they use. They can potentially flag if that call is something that could be fraudulent in nature. So that's how they're using it locally on their machine, and it is very responsible. They're still testing it right now, but that's an example where they're using stuff locally on their machine, where they couldn't do it in the cloud because the latency isn't good enough.
And Eric, I was just to dovetail on what you said. I think this is opening the doors too from a security vendor perspective, because right now you've got Security Copilot from Microsoft, you've got Charlotte AI from CrowdStrike, and you've got other AI tools that vendors are building, but they're cloud-based. But now with these more, and forgive me, Darren, if I'm butchering the name, these AI-ready PCs, but if they're going to be AI ready, then the power to do those AI computations, that will be local then. And that can change the game. So even if you don't have internet access, you still have that AI-powered security tool running on your laptop. Yeah,
Yep.
That's good. That's good. All right. So I know that we've been talking about AI for a little bit. Let's talk about future-proofing security investments. So I'm going to start with Eric here. Can you talk about how to adopt a scalable, adaptable security solutions that can evolve with the workplace, essentially future-proofing your investments?
Sure. I don't want to sound like a salesperson, but I'll sound like a salesperson. You want to buy, I guess, the most current technology available today. If you can refresh. The big thing now, the game changer, is not just the more powerful CPUs, but the NPU itself. So what Intel historically has done is, when I'm going way back in time, I'll use the field of dreams analogy I always use, is we build it, they will come, but we build it, no one came. So now what we're doing is we're building technologies built in the silicon, but we're working with a lot of very large ISVs, so that when we do launch a product, there will be some enablement out of the gate. Now, for the NPU specifically, we've done that already. So out of the gate, when Intel launched these Core Ultra CPUs, there were security vendors that out of the gate had product available. But many other ones, now the product's released commercially, they can build their stuff as well. A lot of customers, they know that the stuff isn't available today, but will be in the near future. So an example of that would be, I bought this old, this is going back in one of the first PCs that had USB in it, but there were 0 USB devices at that time, but within a year they started coming in. So it's basically buying the best technology available today. What some customers do, and I hate to use that security agent footprint, but they buy the i799s because they know the security footprint's so heavy that they need the higher processing power to keep up in the future.
Okay, thanks, Eric. And Darren, same question?
Yeah, I think I may have touched on Windows 11 and the opportunity to refresh right now. If you have dated hardware, doing a little bit of storytelling. I was on site with customers out in Montreal just a couple of weeks ago, and I had passed through a restaurant in the train station, and sure enough, the point of sale device had a Windows XP screensaver, and I was just floored, right? So we know that there's dated technology still in the environments there. Hopefully they are off corporate networks and on their own land that's not going to create kind of security risks, but future proofing your endpoint devices is something you're going to want to think about. The NPU, we've kind of talked about this quite a bit. I know in the white paper you're going to hear that term and read it, so hopefully it's going to start resonating. But the NPU is here to stay, and it's going to be on the independent software vendors, so what we term as the ISVs, to write code to leverage the NPUs. So it's really going to be a long-term play. So from a future-proofing standpoint, work with your hardware teams to ensure that they are looking at an appropriate refresh cycle as it relates to the hardware, but also look to explore if you can include some of these AI capable PCs, so AI ready PCs. You're going to see Copilot Plus PCs. So again, on-device AI experiences are here to stay. I feel like we keep talking about AI on this call, and it's absolutely relevant, right? I feel all of us are kind of tasked with that.
Okay, thanks. So I just wanted to talk about with regards, I'm going to geek out just for a moment here. For me, as a person who's going to be deciding on, okay, we're going to need these new PCs. There's going to be a refresh coming, say in Q, whatever, as part of your roadmap. In terms of resourcing, like CPU power, NPU, all of that, do you have any recommendations on how much we should plan for in terms of a PC to be able to be AI capable or AI ready?
If you want me
Yeah,
to
Darren,
answer
go
that, I'll
ahead.
give you kind
Yeah,
of the Dell lens, and I'm sure
yeah,
Eric can give you the Intel lens.
yeah,
So I can talk through kind of that question from a Microsoft perspective, because
yeah.
they've kind of been the ones to set some of the hardware standards. So to hit what we term the Copilot Plus PC spec, and it's a term that you'll start to see as time goes on. Intel from a Lunar Lake perspective, they're going to have hardware that's going to hit the spec. But the NPU, that neural processing unit, how we measure that today is in TOPS, trillions of operations per second. Now, it's a metric, it's a number. Microsoft has mandated, hey, if you want a Copilot Plus PC, you're going to need a minimum of 16 gigs of memory. Again, hopefully you're going more than 16 because you are thinking about that future-proof scenario. Maybe you're looking at 16 or 32, but 16 is the minimum. Number two, SSD size, 256 gigabyte SSD or higher. Obviously, if you're using cloud-based solutions to do some of your data storage, you're not, storing a lot on the endpoint there. But if you are doing stuff locally, you could be looking at 512 or 1 terabyte. The NPU, as I mentioned, how you measure it, a Copilot Plus PC is going to have to hit 40 plus TOPS. Taking it, a step further, and I'm glancing around here as I often do. You will see on the device, let me grab while I look for your keyboard.
Love it, Darren.
Basically they've mandated that your keyboard now has to have the Copilot key. So on the actual device, and my background's going to mess that up, so let's turn that off quickly in the era that we're in. So as this boots up, but you're now going to see a Copilot key directly on the endpoint. So that's part of this whole AI PC landscape that we're in. So that's going to be the Copilot Plus PC. Now, an AI PC could have an NPU less than 40 TOPS. So Eric talked a lot about Intel Core Ultra Series 1 and what they announced earlier this year. that's going to be just, a regular AI PC. It's going to have that NPU, so still a very good device. So it's going to come down to your licensing agreement with Microsoft. And I realize we're going on a very big tangent here, so we'll reel it in essence of the 15 minutes we have left together. But those are kind of the hardware specs that we're often talking about. Eric, anything additional you want to sprinkle on, or we can get back to some of the questions here?
Yeah,
And this is why I love kind of fireside chats, because we can end up in any different direction.
yeah, I'll just make two comments. What a lot of customers do is have personas, and the question is how to determine the personas. And there's different pieces, but a lot of large companies, what they do is they invest in a digital experience management tool. You've probably heard of NextThink, Eternity, Lakeside. It basically tells you how that PC is operating, what apps are using, what type of utilization is being used by memory, etc. A lot of companies base their, I guess, utilization or the metrics from that digital experience management tool to determine their personas, and then at that point in time, you can determine, the appropriate sizing for the CPU, memory, storage, etc.
Okay, thanks. So, Darren, Eric, I really appreciate you, taking the time to talk to us about some of these challenges, governance, future-proofing technology. I do want to open it up to questions because I know we've got about 15 minutes. So, we've talked about examples of future-proofing or security technology, so that's great. Does anybody here of the attendees, does anybody have any questions for Darren or Eric? Dee?
Hi everyone. Thanks guys for a great chat as always. I just had a kind of a quick question, and it's really to piggyback off some of the stuff that Sonny was saying. I recently been working in the nonprofit industry, and before that, I've been working in two different types of multinationals, and in both cases, the remote working and bring your own device have been kind of the standard operating procedure. And both types of industries deal with a lot of sensitive data. The nonprofit especially is susceptible, given the usually the vulnerable constituencies that are being served by such mission-driven organizations. So what do you think, how far do you think we are in terms of having a standard? Yeah, I know NIST and ISO are slowly integrating some of the AI stuff into their newer standards, but how far are we from adopting or standardizing a framework for bring your own device and for endpoints? Because a lot of these frameworks, the risk management or the threat management or threat assessment frameworks talks about policies and governance in general, but not necessarily go deep down into the endpoint aspect. So how far are we from, as an industry or as a community, from creating and adopting such standards? And how can we, as the people who are actively engaged in thought leadership, how can we push forward such an agenda to have these kind of standards and frameworks becoming kind of like the gold standards or the industry practices?
So let me try to answer that one. In terms of the AI component of it, I won't try to be a doomsday person, but I think we're quite far away because these devices, that's called AI enabled locally, are just coming out now. So it's very, very, it's at the very beginning of it. So I think it'll be a few years out. Now, Intel does sit on various committees, such as the NIST and a bunch of other ones. So adopting standards, I think we're, at least a few years out. That's just my personal opinion, not an Intel statement. This is Eric's statement in terms of, a standardized framework in terms of what's allowable, so to speak, in the environment. And from a nonprofit perspective, at least my wife works in a nonprofit area, and it's very tightly managed. The digital leakage piece of it is quite steady. So anything you plug into the USB port immediately gets flagged if it's not one of the whitelisted devices. I know at least her organization, it is quite heavily regulated and managed as such.
Yeah, I think Eric,
Thank you.
Eric's viewpoint, I think, is the same as Darren's viewpoint. in the sense that, we're probably some time away to get to that centralized standard. I welcome some of you that have dialed in. Maybe you've seen some perspectives here as well that you want to use the chat to kind of cross collaborate here on some of the ideas. But if I talk about NIST in general, because you did reference that, NIST 800-147, we design kind of our BIOS to that spec, and that's ingrained into the hardware story. I'd love to see a future where there is potentially some other framework around AI. So definitely feedback that we can continue to push up the chain and conversations I'm in with product group and things like that. But I do believe as well that maybe we are a little bit away. And I think we got some comment. Let's take a look. Maybe having a policy where those employees who want to use their own mobile device, they must install the organization's SaaS, such as Palo Alto, Zscaler, Netscope, so the organization can protect the data and push the browsing policies. So spot on, right? That's how you're mandating security on your bring your own device. So maybe we'll see more policies of that nature evolve into a NIST framework of some sort.
We can hope. Thanks, Darren.
I think we're all in it together because we all want the same thing.
Absolutely.
So Dee, if I can just touch upon a little bit more of what you just asked, like, are you also referring to like a standardized on how to deploy, build, what the minimum standards should be from a security perspective for endpoints in a hybrid workforce?
Yeah, so
Yes.
that's basically where I was going, right? Because I mean, it's great. Eric mentioned his wife working at a nonprofit where that they have more of a mature model in terms of security, and they have more defined policies. But when you're working with smaller nonprofits, when you're working with um, purely mission and boards that are mission driven and not as cyber aware, that's where the real challenges come up, and that's where us as the cyber community, we're screaming at the top of our voice, no, stop, wait, you have to do this right.
Mhm.
Security, it's a main consideration. It has to be a main consideration, and it has to be a business consideration. And unfortunately, it's not always the case. And in the case of multinationals, when you have different regulations, I mean, which ones do you adhere to? Do you go GDPR? Do you go, do you go with NIST? Do you go with ISO? Like sometimes there's multiple frameworks, and which is the one that it's a current challenge now, but with the advent of AI and to almost everything. And let's face it, the cyber criminals, they tend to have less ethics than we do, and they're working a lot faster than we are at perfecting their techniques. So as we try to catch up and keep up with what they're doing, we also need to have kind of a baseline standard for, hey, we should do this at the very minimum.
No, I agree. I agree, Dee, and I hear your challenges because I've experienced it and I've heard it.
Hmm.
One thing, and this may not be the case for all of you, but one thing that I've seen which is successful, and it's very prescriptive. It's the Center for Internet Security. It's the CIS benchmarks. The beauty of that I see, because there are CIS benchmarks for endpoints, Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 2019, the Mac, and other technologies, is it's broken into groups, and it's known as implementation groups. So you've got IG, that's the acronym for implementation groups. All it means is a level 1, 2, 3. Level 1 is companies that don't have security teams, don't have big budget. These are your foundational security controls. And at the end of the day, that from my experience as a person who's been accountable for cybersecurity, companies who do foundational security right are much less at risk of being breached. Obviously, there's no silver bullet, but the CIS benchmarks I find to be very valuable. And then that can be part of the overall NIST cybersecurity framework.
Yeah, to quantify this a little bit, Sunny, the ones who do the
Yeah.
CIS control IG ones, those are considered the basic or the cyber hygiene controls. They are 84% less likely to
Oh, wow.
experience. Yeah, and that accounts for 84% of the risk. A lot of the more mature controls are complementary, but you need to have your
Yeah.
basics down, right? Like you start with securing your assets and your software. That's the first step. and then start worrying about your more advanced processes, right? So as you said, the maturity levels of the implementation groups and the CIS controls are really good kind of guideline for starting point. Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Dee.
No
Jamie,
worries.
you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Jamie here from McDougall Energy. So just a quick, I mean, let's face it, AI is not going away. We all agree. And the tools are being adopted to support it, which we all agree. For me, we can have policies, we can have, data security, we can have data governance, we can have all those pieces. But it even takes a trusted person to paste in something into an LLM, and that information's gone, right? And who knows where that's going, right? We all keeps me up at night. I'm sure it keeps you up at night. Other than on-demand text scanners and stuff running overhead on CPUs or NPUs, maybe. What are other tools that maybe others can introduce to help protect? Hey, that's coveted data. You cannot paste that into an LLM. Kind of gotcha. On-demand scanning are these being considered? And to me, this is the only way. Just put it out for comment.
Yeah, if I may, if I think about Dell Technologies as a whole, my day-to-day role is more so on the endpoint side, but our infrastructure, our back-end solutions can help you build your own type LLM database that would be gated within your firewall. So from a Dell Technologies standpoint, we truly have the most broadest end-to-end portfolio as it relates to AI. So if we go back to your question, Jamie, as opposed to using a public LLM where that's training your own data, it's bringing it on-prem, building your own chatbot or document repository where you're able to do RAG, retrieval, augmented generation, chat query, and things like that. It's ultimately, I think, going to come down to the type of LLMs you're working with, the type of use cases for AI that you see. So if you're not already in conversations kind of with the Dell account team, we'd love to sit down and get to know kind of what you're doing in that space.
Yeah, totally understand and respect that, and not to discredit that whole private AI copilot or whatever instance we want. But again, I think we talked a little bit about earlier about people's preference, right? Firing up this LLM or that one, or taking it home, right? Working from home and saying, hey, I'm gonna just open a browser and pump something in, right? Other than yes, you can provide it, but somebody might just, hey, well, I want to use my own, right? So again, that is a whole different model, right? And that, to me, again, that's terrifying.
Okay, so this brings us to the end. I do want to thank Darren and Eric. A sincere thank you. You guys, both at Dell and Intel, are doing fantastic things with regards to, increasing our security posture in this truly hybrid and AI-driven era. So the white paper is now available on the CIOCAN website. So please, folks, have a read. I find it very informative, very valuable. And Eric and Darren, thank you so much for your time. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time to spend the hour with us, learning about Darren and Eric, both Dell and Intel's perspectives on security in the AI-driven and hybrid workforce.
So thank you, Sunny, for bringing us all together and keeping our talk track on point there. And shout out to the CIO members who actually provided some of the input in that white paper, and going through some of the names that are on here. Your feedback was incorporated. So thanks to all of you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful holiday if we don't see you before. And we look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thank you for your support, Dell, Intel. It's been a fantastic, love the working relationship and all the content that's come out of it. So we really appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
guys.
Take
Bye-bye.
care, everyone.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care.